Hello, welcome in. If you're here listening to this podcast, that means you're destined for something great, and we both know it to be true. So without further ado, welcome to the Dark Matter Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Dark Matter Podcast. Dev here, and today I brought on another guest, Dylan Bost. His professional titles, he is the founder of Sunny HQ, he's a systems architect, and a conscious creator. When going back and forth, I felt this would be a great fit, very aligned with a lot of the values that we like to bring to this show. And I think we can have a great conversation. So I'm super excited for this one. For the audience that doesn't know you yet, if you could just give a quick background overview of your story, and then we can dive right in.
Yeah, we all have these very kind of interwinding stories. I think for me, it comes down to a big pivotal moment in my life was running an agency and a beautiful experience. And really, even though with all the successes that I enjoyed, wonderful employees, clients, awards, all the things, really felt an alignment miss. And a challenge in trying to figure that out about 15 years ago, and really a rediscovery of myself. That took me out of the United States. And well, at first it started with a real explosion of things, and we can get into that later. But out of the United States, and really enabled me to do some deep work personally, which helped me to build a new company that is much more in alignment with who I am and the core values that I really found in my 40s, into a closer connection with family and children and wife, and really in alignment with building a business that I felt was not just there to find success to the world, but success within, and success with my family and with clients. And so really just a beautiful opportunity to rediscover who I am.
Hmm. And there's so much here, and I'm so excited for this conversation. I know a big thing that you like to share is that, your work lives at the intersection of operations and embodiment. And I absolutely love that because I feel like for me, I spent the last couple of years coaching coaches, and a lot of people get into, coaching or starting a business because they want to make a lot of money. But, hearing it from the opposite end, when you just focus on getting so much money, you realize that your values can, very quickly catch up to you, and then you're just overwhelmed, exhausted. You're doing all this work and you have all this money, but you don't actually, feel fulfilled in the work that you're doing. So going into your story, I really want to touch really quickly on the agency. So what sort of agency were you doing? How did you get into that? And then what were you coming into, like specifically when you started feeling misaligned with that opportunity, that career path?
Yeah, so the agency was, well, it kind of grew out of I was educated in architecture, and though heavily on the digital side, and so I was into 3D modeling and visualization, and that led into the late 90s into the web, and started building websites with a partner, and that developed into a full brand agency. So we managed, brand marketing communications for thousands of different customers. And really, overall, I think it was an incredible chance to work with, a wide variety of people. The thing that I come back to is that, at the time, I think, and this is a challenge for, I think, a lot of young people, right? That, for me, not being aware of the insides, let's just say, I was constantly looking at what was going on outside myself, and what you do, right? Well, you go to school and you get a degree, and then you go do that job. And I think especially in the US, we chase this idea of success. It's really conditioned into us. And And so I think that was the thing. It was wonderful, but what kind of happened is at one point I remember looking up and thinking, I remember actually the day standing in my office and again had, we won all the awards and great clients, great, great employees and really no arguments there. But I asked myself, what is this for? And why am I doing this? And it was really an existential question, right? I mean, it really hit me to a core because I couldn't answer it. And in life, to say I prided myself is probably an accurate thing that I always had the answer. I'm very good at solving problems and solving those puzzles. And it was this question that hit really deep and core because not only could I not answer the question, this was now a question that directly affected me, right? It directly affected, you know, my sense of self. And so that was that moment of really just looking out and saying, what in the world? And it took quite a while to really figure that out.
Well, how did you? Like I feel like this is like you're saying, there's a lot of people that go through this conditioning piece and whether it's the American dream or you can do whatever you want, and then of course there's all these manifestation coaches and people just saying, "Oh, I created all this success and I just, thought it and they dreamt it." And so now you're here and you're exactly right. That question, it pertains to you. It's your direction, it's your next steps, it's like your whole livelihood, it's everything that you know to be true. So, you're sitting there thinking about it. Like, what is that next thing that you do? Like, did it take you a little bit of time to really think about it? Did you journal? Did you just stop everything that you're doing? Like, what was that next step after you came to that conclusion of, wow, I really don't know the answer to this question?
Yeah, it was the tough thing. Well, I guess what I would have liked to have said to myself, or if I had, a mentor at that point who, the first point is I didn't share that with anyone, right? I tried to white knuckle it and go at it by myself.
Mhm.
And I think the first thing I would have told myself is allow yourself some grace. It's okay, right? Because in reality, no one knows the answer, right? And it's an interesting thing. I think we tend to think that, well, if I don't keep doing that, these other people look like they're doing great, right? And they have all the answers when in reality, no one really does. And so for me, I started with, fortunately, I came across a couple of books that were seeds. One of them was by called Pieces Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a beautiful Vietnamese, was a beautiful Vietnamese monk. Um, and and I read that book, and it's interesting because I probably read that book 10, 15 times.
Mhm.
And I would buy copies of it and share it with people. And I didn't really understand it, but until much later. But all I knew is it helped me start to understand something. It taught me, where to start with meditation. And I know it's interesting. A lot of people, have an issue with meditation. How do I, it's just crazy and my mind won't let go and it's frustrating. And I get all those things. The thing that Thich Nhat Hanh teaches and that I think is beautiful is meditation can come in a lot of different forms, right? So walking meditation, driving meditation, washing the dishes meditation. The idea that I learned from meditation, right, is that it's not about necessarily quieting the mind, but it is about being aware of the thoughts that come into play and letting them flow through you. So it's okay if you think about your bills or your wife or your child and their school and all the things, but not dwelling on those and not hanging on to them. And so the beginning for me was really about trying to find kind of that inner peace. And that happened through really reading and reading and reading. I read a lot of different books. You're a Badass by Jen Sincero is fantastic. Um, Mel Robbins, of course, is fantastic. Another core that helped me to create my new business was the Four Agreements, and by Don Miguel Ruiz. And these books started to teach me different things. And honestly, it took years. I talk to people a lot about this, and my wife keeps telling me to stop saying. I say I'm a slow learner in this aspect of my life, and she says, "Stop. You're not. It just is what it is," and I agree with that. Um, but I think again, I fall back on giving yourself the grace to be okay. Maybe you were fantastic in school. Maybe you're great at your job, but if you don't quite get it, the idea is just to keep practicing, right? So just to keep practicing all of the things, whether that's meditation, whether that's some form of body movement, any of those things to me, all of those different kind of modalities gave me little foundational pieces that enabled me to then build on who I really am and what I really want for me.
Hmm. There's so much here, and I absolutely love that when you said specifically there a lot of people when they get into meditation, the first thing that they think about or the first thing that they see or the first thing that they try is to try to quiet the mind by forcing themselves to stop having those running thoughts and those racing thoughts. And we know that it's impossible to do that, especially if you're, 30 years old or older. It's been going on for 30 plus years. So now today you're choosing to do something, and it's kind of like the concept of you've never done it and now this is your first time. It's like if you've never swam before and you jump straight into the deep end, yeah, you might be able to figure it out, but there is a steps, there is processes to that, to really help the longevity of it, the consistency and the sustainability of it. So I love that you mentioned, the mindfulness and, the meditation. And it's interesting too, you said driving meditation. Like it's interesting because I love to drive and I feel like when I do drive, it clears my head. So what is like that? Like, is that what it is? You just find something that you love and then you realize it can clear your head, or like what is driving meditation as an example?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because awareness to me is my new drug, right? And it's funny how we take something like driving for granted, right? There's so many things that we do just naturally that we're not even really aware of. And in fact, I think a lot of people can relate to this, right? When we drive, let's say we drive someplace that we know the path, right? We know the path from work to home. And if you think about it, let's say we turn on a podcast or listen to some music, we could get in a car for 30 minutes driving from work to home and get home. And if you really ask yourself the question, you might figure out that I'm not even sure how I got here, right? Because our amygdala kicks in and it knows which way to turn and it keeps us safe and all those things. So the idea is to maybe shift the perspective on that and try one time not turning on anything, right? And being completely aware of that entire drive. And that I think is the meditation itself. It can be super frustrating, right? I mean, that first time you do it, you're like, oh, I can't believe that this is happening. What do I do? I need to listen to something. But I think there's a beauty in that. And there's a beauty in, realizing that I'm reaching for the turn signal. I'm turning on the air. What's that feeling in my left foot? Maybe I'm pushing too hard on the floorboard, which is going to lead to some kind of muscle tensing and soreness. But being aware, there's so many things that we are not aware of in our body while we're sitting there because we're driving from our mind. And I think that's the thing is starting to have an awareness more when it comes to walking through a door. I love to use this example with my kids. I'm like, walk through the door, feel your hand touch the handle, turn the handle, walk slowly, slow your pace down instead of just, moving through that space, from space to space and slamming the door and not even realizing what happened. There's really a wonder that happens in that environment that makes us, that to me, the net result of that, right? The benefit is it starts to make us more aware of our individual space and makes us aware. Of our bodies. I used to be, when it comes to driving, I can't wait to get there, right? I'm living in the future and I'm trying to shave minutes off. For about a year, I had a commute that was about 45 minutes from Raleigh to Durham. And it was interesting how that experience of that year kind of broke me of that because I decided instead of thinking constantly about getting in front of that next person or around that thing or into that lane or to take that right, I really consciously, at one point, I remember thinking, the space in between the car that's behind me and the car that's in front of me, that is literally the space that I am in and it just happens to be a moving space, right?
Hmm.
And so I stopped thinking about getting in front of the next person and really just being in that space. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it was really profound just to literally be in that space. Because the cool thing is, right, that space changes.
Hmm.
So, it's not like being completely still, yet you can introduce a stillness to it that is a really profound thing.
Well, it's kind of like energy work, right? And, for those that are familiar with, the different types of auras and how some people
Mhm.
are great with babies and pets and animals and stuff like that, it's like your aura. And so the way that you're describing this, it's awareness, but the way that I'm kind of visualizing it in my head, it's kind of like your presence, right? Like that is your presence. And when you get comfortable with your presence, you know the kind of energy that are walking with, are being with, are moving with. I think it really does add to a different layer of your individual self, right? And I was saying this before, a lot of people nowadays, it's like, hey, who are you? And it's like, oh, I am title, right? I am this person, I am this career. It's not like, who are you? And so I love this as a practice because you get to be who you are and focus on the individual gifts and talents that you have. And so I absolutely love this. So,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I think and you brought up a beautiful word, presence, right? Presence, awareness. These are really key things for me right now. I learned a lot about presence, and we lived in Costa Rica for a couple of years and was in actually some plant medicine circles. And one of the things that I learned really the art, the beauty of presence. I spent in 2.5 years, it was interesting towards the end of, I didn't know it was the end of our time there, but I remember thinking, man, this is the first time I looked up and I thought, I've been in these circles with people. And a circle meaning doesn't have to be a plant medicine ceremony circle, but just literally in a group of people, right? Where it was a dinner or some lunch affair. And so I knew these people, but to your point of presence and that kind of standard elevator pitch we all have for who we are, I
Hmm.
realized I don't know what any of these people do professionally. I'd known these people for 2 years, and in a way, I knew them better as human beings than I'd ever known anyone in my life.
Hmm.
And it was a really it's something I practice a lot now, and I'm not really good at it all the time. I try to avoid that kind of elevator pitch for, what do you do? And now it's funny, I kind of stray away from it. People say, what do you do? And I'm like, let's talk about like what I like to do instead of
Hmm.
what I do. And maybe there's some work in there, and sure there is. I enjoy my job, but to your point, it's true, and I think that's where we start to introduce presence. If And it's a hard question for a lot of people to say, well, if you're not your story, and this is something that's the first chapter in this book I'm writing, that we're not our story, we're storytellers, right? And there's a really powerful juxtaposition there, right? Of when we stop resting on all the things that we have been and rather what we are by virtue of those things. It's a very interesting thing to say. These are the experiences that I have, and they make me who I am today. So I maybe tell them from the perspective of what they taught me, but not in their exactness for what happened at the time, and because that's not who we are. Who I was 10 years ago, heck, who I was yesterday is not who I am today. So it's an interesting thing, that idea of presence, true presence.
Right. So what is the seven mirrors? I want you to talk a little bit about that. What is the seven mirrors?
So I have done a lot of deep investigation, and something that's been on my mind for years is writing a book. And I went through all the feelings and emotions of, who do you think you are? What story do you what do people actually want to hear from you? And that kept me away from it from far too long. And I sat with a teacher at one point in a sweat lodge called a Temescal. And it was interesting. I'm 55 now, and this is a year ago. And um, in the process, there are four doors essentially, and the four doors are separated into one of the examples that they give through the Toltec lineage is that each door represents a period in time. And so towards the end, and the period in time is 13 years. So 1 to 13, 13 to 26, and so on and so forth. And we got to the end, and I had never, he always asked who is the age that's representative of that door. And I'd never spoke up. And he said, Dylan, how old are you? And I told him, and he said, brother, you're an abuelo. And now abuelo is Spanish for grandfather. But in that lineage and in the Spanish language, it's much more encompassing of the role that you, I guess the where you are in your life and what you have to give to the world. And he said, brother, you need to teach. You're in this place of having gained this experience, and now it's your time to teach this message. And it hit me profoundly because um, I didn't consider myself in that role yet, right? And so I looked at that moment and through investigating what story I wanted to tell, and it really just hit me this idea of I'd heard over and over and over in a lot of different circles, right? And you've heard this metaphysically, right? Where our higher self, this idea of our higher self, and something never really sat right with me in that. Because implying that I'm trying to achieve my higher self or my higher being means that I'm a lower version of that right now, and I couldn't make sense of that. And the thing that hit me earlier this year was it's not necessarily about trying to move into a higher position as much as it's trying, this effort of remembering who I am, right? And the reality is we're all born perfect. It's through conditioning and all the factors of life that start to shape then the persona that we have, to the outward world. And so I started with this very simple idea of through all the things and the practices that I've had, I've continued this down this path of remembering who I actually am. And so the seven mirrors came into play because I started to dissect that, and I looked at the I guess another idea is that we, in the world, right, we, in order to understand who we are, we can look to the inside, right? And that's its own challenge. But a key thing that I started noticing is this idea of mirrors, that you're a mirror for me, right? The people that we see on the street, our families, experiences are mirrors, but recognizing when someone is in a mirror. And so when somebody asks me, what does that mean? Well, that means, and I think a lot of people can relate with this. I see someone, whether it's, let's say it's a family member at a reunion, and they really just get on my nerves, right? There's something about them that just really tweaks me. And usually the go-to there is we react to that and we either push them away or maybe we say something cutting. But the beauty in understanding that people are mirrors, and it's understanding that the reason why we're triggered by that event is because we see something, we see a behavior in them that's our own behavior. It's very hard to see ourselves, right? Because are we are ourselves, right? So where we can start to see those things is recognizing those in other people. And so the mirrors are there. This metaphor is there to teach these kind of seven principles as mirrors so that we can start to see those things and then heal those aspects of our life. And so it's really separated out that way.
Hmm. I love this because even when I had my first experience into entrepreneurship, I did door-to-door sales, and we were trained by Grant Cardone, and he was very big on your attitude and your approach and these things. And he used to say that people that you talk to are mirrors. And
Mm.
there was a quick thing that we would do, and it would just be knock five doors and just be straight, like maybe be a little bit excited, but in the bad way, like more of like anxious, and just see
Mhm.
how people are. And you feel it, right? Like the energy, it's like people are kind of like rolling their eyes, they're hesitant to come talk to you. You like the conversation doesn't feel good, and then do the opposite, smile, be excited to conversate with this person. And it's a night and day difference in how your attitude and the energy that you bring, the presence that you bring, affects those people. And I like what you're saying here. And it's timely too, with it being, Christmas time. But I know there's a lot of people that maybe they grew up a certain way with their family. Whenever they're around their family, they do certain things maybe they're not so proud of. They go away, they learn and they grow. And then when they come back to seeing family time, there are those triggers and it ends up being this huge thing. I know, in my family, whenever we get together, it usually ends in, you know, fighting because of this. So I actually love this. So the seven, you said there's seven principles or there's seven pieces to this?
Seven mirrors, right? Yep.
And what it can you share? Is that part of your book? Can you share what the seven mirrors are?
Yeah. So the seven mirrors are the storyteller, the witness, the flame, the architect, the harmonic fool, the pattern keeper, and the bridge.
Hmm. And how does it
So
all, yeah, how does it come together?
yeah, well, so it's interesting because I think you can. It starts with the storyteller. So and I think that's it. What I say in the book is you can hop around. Each of the mirrors is presented in a way from my own experience on how I kind of understand these things, and then there are kind of a list of practices that you can put into place to help you kind of recognize that. And starting with the storyteller, like I said earlier, the importance is starting to understand that. This is something so close to me. How many times have you sat at a bar or been at a dinner party or been at Christmas time and you meet someone and you know, they know who you are, but really you start all of your discussions are the majority of your discussions are who you were, not
Hmm.
who you are. And it goes to what you were talking about earlier, the importance of once we start to practice these things is we can then start to uncover who we think we are and who we want to be. Um, it moves into things like, um, you know, the flame, the true path is not found, it's felt. So moving out of the head space, right, into the body. This was a big one for me. I spent a good 40 years, probably 95% making decisions from my head. And maybe someone's asking right now, well, of course, that's where you make decisions from. I get it. But what I found the importance is our head is this very small portion of our entire being, not even starting to speak about the energetic side of who we are. But think about this. Our mind is an organ, our brain's an organ, just like our heart, our stomach, and the mind has one job to solve problems. Now, that's a really great tool. It's an amazing tool. But when we let it make 100% of the decisions for us, it's going to run in a bunch of different directions. If it doesn't have a problem to solve, I know that everyone can relate to this, right? It starts to manufacture problems for it to solve.
Hmm.
That leads to suffering directly, right? And that monkey mind kicks in. And what if this and what if that and what if is a terrible place to live. I found in that process is when you start to really, you know, push the mind away and start to listen from your heart, start to listen from your body is actually much more intelligent, and your body knows what you want much more than your head. Your head's trying to solve the problem, your body knows. So that comes into play. You move into things like the architect, and form follows frequency. So that's paying closer attention to what is the flow of life. I love this. What is we constantly say that, good things don't come without hard work. I hate that, right? Should be about smart work, but also, good things don't come easy is another one. That's completely incorrect.
Hmm.
Fantastic things come, and I think much better things come with very little effort. The reality is that doesn't mean I don't have to try. That doesn't mean I don't have to work in a way that's diligent. But what that means is it's about flow. If something feels good, right? If you and I are having a great conversation and we continue down that path, that's a great example instead of having an argument with someone, right? So then you move into one of the pattern keeper. I love this. It goes back to what we talked about earlier. Is awareness is the beginning. Rewrite the code. Awareness to me, was a big deal in my life when I pretty much crashed our entire family. I had alcohol issues, had some addiction things, led to a bankruptcy 15 years ago. And what I learned in that process is I actually wasn't aware of traumas that I had from childhood. And that's where awareness came so big to me because I find now that, for instance, when I become aware, and the reason why I say it's a new drug, right, is that when I become aware of something, a behavior of mine, it's almost impossible to ignore it. In fact, it takes a lot more energy to not try to correct that behavior than it does to keep suppressing it. You can, yeah, I know people that you can hang on to it and you can keep pushing it down, but that awareness side, once you become aware, your world opens up to you, right? I mean, now I can stop thinking about the fact that all of these things in the world keep happening to me. They're happening for me to make different decisions. I'm aware of that now. And so it's really a beautiful thing. And then, we close things out. The last mirror is the bridge, and it's walk what you remember. That's the alchemy. So once you really start to remember who you are at your core, then you can make decisions in a whole new different light.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so much here, and I absolutely love this. So this is going to be in your new book. Do you have like a estimated time when this is going to be released?
Think in the spring. I'm towards the end right now. Yeah, so I'm getting pretty excited about it.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm actually excited listening to this and even what you're just sharing here. There's so many pieces that one could be useful for so many people, but then even two for me, just thinking about this and hearing how you've, really strategically done this and laid this book out, there are those, foundational pieces that you should really look to tackle one at a time. And I absolutely love this and I love the book. And so through it all, thank you for sharing the story too, because I do agree, even with the traumas, like I think, we're so impressionable from, 0 to 7 years old. So the beliefs, the habits, everything that you're around. I know when I was younger, my parents used to fight a lot. So I found that to be a repeating pattern in a lot of the relationships
Mhm.
until I became aware of it. And then I could choose that I didn't have to do that. So through it all, where does that take you today? So what do you do today? I know you mentioned like Sunny HQ and these sorts of things, but what after getting through all of this and really turning everything around and following that internal guidance, like where does that brought you today?
Yeah, I think, and the book is meant to, it's a personal journey, but there's a lot of business in it. I mean, the idea for me was to really, when I talk about, so I had this kind of existential crisis with my first business at an interesting point where things are great and still had these questions. So you know, I wrote all this in the book as kind of as a recap of what it took me to get to where I am today. And in doing that, the idea is not just looking at a business in kind of business terms, not just saying, okay, what's going to make money? I mean, that's at the end of the day what a lot of entrepreneurs say. And yes, I like this, but that's going to make a lot of money. I really looked at it like, what would I enjoy doing every day? What's going to bring value to the people that I do it for externally? And then though, too, what does that mean for my life, right? What does that mean? What kind of life do I want to build? And that's a question I did not answer when I built the first business, or when I got my first job. Meaning, what kind of time do I want to have for me, for my wife, for my children? How long do I want to work each day? And so, what that did is it led me to Sunny HQ. I took a look at all the things that worked well in the first company, but then all the things I wanted personally. and built a company too that from a lot of aspects was smart as a business exercise, right? It's a recurring revenue business. So that's something, my first business, the way I put it is branding marketing is a very subjective business, meaning, we have a project and I'm going to design something for you. And you know what? That could take a month or it might take 6 months. I designed five things. You may like one or you don't like any. We do it over and over and over. And there, listen, I love those experiences, but I'm done with them, right? I wanted something to me, the business today is very objective, meaning website either works or it doesn't. We've solved your problem or we didn't. There's no two ways around it. There's not like, oh, it kind of works. It either does or it doesn't. And so, in the beauty there too is I got down to some very simple, let's say deliverables, meaning the service that we provide is an extremely tight platform. It's very different in the marketplace. So if you have a WordPress website, for instance, you can host a lot of different places. But I looked at it and I said, well, the reality though is that there are great hosts out there, but they're at this technical level that don't jive really with what customers need. If you're running a yoga studio or a surfaces business or a law firm, you focus on law or surfaces or yoga, right? You don't care how the website's built. An analogy, let me put it this way, right? It's like, I don't know, maybe there's a small part of listeners out there that can change the oil in their car. I could teach somebody how to change the oil, but no one does it. Why? Well, because it's dirty. I don't know what to do with the oil. It takes 3 hours of time. And so we pay someone to do that, right? So that we can focus on our lives. And that's what we really do for WordPress websites. We focus on 100% of the technical aspects. So we're very different, right? Our service is night and day from what's out there. People come to us, they focus on their business. We do everything that's technical. For me, foundationally for our culture, the wonderful thing is the platform from a technology side is super strong. Um, but when we do interface with our customers, we're really, really fast. And the beauty is for the customers, of course, love that, but we love that because our staff is able to make really huge changes in those customers' eyes
Mm.
in a very short period of time. So, meaning we experience success every single day, right? We get to the end of a day and 100% of support tickets have been answered. And we know that, it may sound kind of trite that, okay, this form isn't working on a website. But what I train our people is I'm like, look, the problem is that may be an easy thing, right, to fix. But understand this, if that's not working and the customer can't sell a product or they can't answer a question, it's a really big deal to them. And so the cool thing is we can fix that in 5 minutes. And so you can imagine we make all these little shifts and our customers love it, right? These are things that unfortunately, until they found us, may have taken a week for them to get figured out because they're trying to get, some web developer that built the site that they can't even find anymore, or maybe they're going to a large hosting company and they're answering the question in a technical way. At the end of the day, the customer is sitting there scratching his head, just like, I just want this fixed. And so that's what we do, and it's great, right? It really builds on a culture of helping. That's the reason why I say we're a human first company,
Mm.
tons of technology, but we don't rely on that. The reality is what I recognize is the customer service side of it is the most important.
And you're absolutely right, and to your point here of, it's just a form, it's so quickly for you to fix, but then for them, they have all these questions, all these question marks, then they have clients they gotta manage, they have their content to post, they got other
Yeah.
things that they're doing. It's chaotic. So it absolutely makes sense as to why having something like this or having that team behind you to allow you to focus on the things that you want to focus on, it's incredible, right? Like that, I think
Yeah.
that's a really huge shift for a lot of people.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so two questions left for you. So I kind of want to touch back in the beginning. So for someone who, because again, in my audience, I have a lot of either aspiring or experienced
Hmm.
coaches, and whether they're kind of getting into this space or they've been in the space for a little while, I feel like the trend of it all has always changing. It's always new things are coming out. You got AI coming out now. You got new strategies. You got new things. What would you say to the person that is kind of ready for that next level in their life, but doesn't really know the steps to take in, really uncovering the truth within themselves, where they want to go? Is it a fulfillment piece? Is it a goal setting piece? Like, what would you say to that person who wants to get to the next level, but just doesn't really know where to go?
I'm going to borrow something from Jen Sincero because it was really powerful for me. So in between closing my first company and really trying to figure out, to your point, I had all this energy, I was ready. I didn't really know, and I didn't necessarily feel stuck, but I also didn't know what to do next. And I'd read You're a Badass, and at that point, this was about 10 years ago, Jen Sincero was offering with her, it was really cool. It was an online course, an 8-week course, basically to answer a question and move something forward, because it could be anything, whether you were wanting to start a company or write a book or what, I don't know, any goal that you had in your mind. And so I thought, maybe this is something I need to go through because I'd started a company before, so I knew all the logistical things to do, right? And you start to make lists. And because I'd done branding, I mean, I can do all the things, but I really didn't know the things that I didn't know. And she had this wonderful process. The whole thing started with this. And I was kind of new to meditation. So I think this can, people can relate to this. It was do a meditation where you really kind of process deeply sometime in the future, right? It doesn't matter if it's 5, 10, or 30 years in the future, but fully visualize this story that you have. Meaning, don't try to think of something, but literally live something in your mind. And I first went into this with a lot of apprehension. And at the time, I really hadn't really written anything because the idea is you're going to come out of this meditation, you're going to write this story. And of course, placed probably too much pressure on myself in this process, but I slowed down. I just said, just move forward. So I did the meditation and I came out of it. What was wild is I wrote about a 5-page paper. I wrote this very detailed story, and that's the key, right? Is to, and whether you can write or not is not the important thing. This is for you, right? So it's like journaling, and I wrote this story. The story, I woke up in the morning and I rolled over and there was my wife. So honestly, at the time, there were problems in our marriage because of all the things I've spoken about earlier. And I was super excited that there was my wife in the future, right? I was in this beautiful house in this tropical setting, and you know, I could go on forever about the story because I remember it. But the idea is as I went through the day, it involved whether it was as it was cars or planes, or I moved into a business and I could describe this business. So I'd started this think tank business, and I knew the names of the 5 people that I worked with, and why I wanted to work with them. Um, we were flying to go pick up my daughter to go to someplace in Europe, and all of this, as you can start to imagine, right? It was very telling about my situation, but even the pieces told me. So, for instance, I was selling the company that I hadn't yet created.
Mm,
And what this told me, and after then reviewing this with her, I started to pick it apart and realized an important thing, that one, that I really like the creation of things, that I like to move through things. And so, but two, the where I lived, the time that I had with my family, all these were very telling pieces. And so the meditation didn't tell me how to build the business, but it told me what I wanted in the business, right? It
mm,
told me I didn't wake up and go to some place where I was, working for 12 hours and then coming home. And so I think that's the thing. I think it's we know the answer. And now when I look back on that, that was out of my head into my body, right? I was feeling what I liked and what I thought that I was going to enjoy. I wasn't thinking about that. And so that's, I think, can be a really, really powerful thing.
mm. Yeah, I love this. And you mentioned it a couple times here too, right? Like your logical mind is always going to work to solve problems or create the problems. And then, you can learn a lot about the direction to take just by the feeling. And I love the idea of like leading first with the feelings, whether it's a job, a relationship, a business deal, whatever it is. You feel it, and even when you're out in public and see someone like that's really loud and obnoxious, you already get that feeling like, oh, this is not someone I want to be around. So I love the idea of leading with the feeling in a way.
Yeah,
So
and your mind gets in the way, right? Your mind totally gets in the way because you start to think, oh, well, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that.
right,
And I say throw all that away. Decide what you want. This is the most important thing is decide what you want. The cool thing is we have such fantastic tools now. We have fantastic tools and fantastic people, coaches that you're talking to, you know, decide what you want, unencumbered by what you don't think you can do. I think that's where the mind starts to trick us, right? It starts to say, well, just like me talking about the book, my mind was saying, well, who wants to hear that from you? Rather than, and you know what, in reality, if no one does, no one does. But I'll learn a lot through that entire process. And then most likely people will want to hear from it. But if I if we never try, if we never move towards that, I love this, right? You're going to hit, you know, we're gonna hit 0% of the target we don't aim at, right? So if we don't make that decision, and I really, it comes back to me offering yourself some grace just to say, well, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. And I think the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, to me, that's the most important skill set they have. These people that are out there that say, you know what, I don't care that I don't know how to do that. I can figure it out.
right. And it's the resilience, right? Like I think that's the number one rule of entrepreneurship is you got to be resilient because
Yeah.
you can build a plan, you can have everything, you can visualize it, but when things don't go your way, it's how quickly can you bounce back, right?
Yeah,
So,
and they're not going to go. They're not going to go your way. And that's okay though, too. I don't know. I learned now that the reality is there's beauty in all of it. So when it doesn't go your way, here's the cool thing about that, right? That's telling you something. Why didn't it go your way? Don't look at it like, oh, it's again, the universe is happening for us and not to us, right? So look at why that didn't work, and that's more telling. It's like I tell my kids all the time, failure is so important, right? Because nothing happens perfectly for everyone. But the people that do really well recognize, well, I failed in that regard. So, but it taught me these three things. Okay, well, I'm going to correct those three things, and now I'm going to succeed, or maybe I almost succeed, and I'm going to fail a little bit more, and then you just keep going.
it's kind of like the idea of like events that happen are just events. We put the meaning to it.
Right.
You're driving down this path, your tire pops. Immediately, a lot of our minds will go to this is a bad thing, but maybe that was preventing something else from happening. Or maybe
Yeah.
someone who's going to come, the tow truck driver needs your help or is looking for a client.
100%.
You never really know, right? And so that's why I love the idea that we put it things that happen are just events. They're not good, not bad, and it's just they're happening, and you've got to just like flow, roll with the punches almost.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Well, this was a great conversation, Dylan. Thank you so much for being on. And of course, wrapping this up, where can people learn more about you? What you're up to, how to work with you, things like that. Do you have a specific place you want to direct them?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple places. You can go to my website, dylanclaytonbost.com. And of course, Sunny HQ, you can get there, sunnyhq.io. And we've even got sunnyhq.io/podcast for anybody that's specifically looking for help with their site. We've got a free PDF that just is here, check this out, run it against your site. We've got some tests, and you can know more about your own website. It's super helpful.
Incredible. So for those that are listening, Sunny, so sunnyhq.io/podcast. Go check it out. Dylan, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for being on here. And of course, to the listener, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please keep sharing the show and following and all that jazz. And if you haven't heard, Jess and I are doing our last masterclass of the year called Biz in a Box. Just going to give you all the tools to start your business in 2026. So links will be down below. Links to connect with Dylan will be down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, share, subscribe to it all. You know I appreciate it. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.